I'd like to open up the public service meeting. And we have two items on the agenda. The first item is the application for renewal of the junk dealer's license Best Buy stores at 769 Donald Lynch Boulevard. Do we have a representative from Best Buy here? That being the case, I will just, Mr. President, put it on the next agenda. The second agenda item is order number 23-100-8842. Excuse me. Now, order number 23-100-8860. Communications from Council President Ossing, together with a proposed amendment to the City Code, Chapter 510, Sewer, to use of public sewer. This is a very important item, and I hope we have a good talk about it and see how important it is. And the first thing I'd like to do is to read the communications from the President. Honorable City Councilors, I recently revisited the Sewer Ordinance 10-2, Section D, requiring the connection to the city system can be a chance to assist homeowners when the Department of Public Works does not have the drawings for the sewer stub connection points. Councilors may recall when the order was revised in 2021, order number 21-100-8230 Charlie, in 2022 order number 22-100-8537B, the Department of Public Works indicated there was in the order of 425 parcels that had a septic system that has access to the city system. It has come to the attention of Councilor Wagner and President Ossing that in some instances the Department of Public Works is not in the possession of the sewer drawings that show the location of the sewer stub to facilitate the connection to the city's sewer system. This can cause homeowners additional expense trying to find the sewer stub to complete the connection at the time of the sale as required by the City Code. To address this issue, Councilor Wagner and Councilor President Ossing, I recommend the attached draft ordinance that changes and refer to Urban Affairs for review with the Department of Public Works. The Department of Public Works has the technology to use a video camera to send down the sewer line to find the location of the sewer stub, thereby saving homeowners money and time when trying to satisfy the requirement of the sewer ordinance. Thank you for your consideration and review of this matter. And I appreciate the fact that the President wrote this letter, called it to our attention. There's a couple of key points in this letter that some of us maybe weren't too aware of, and realizing that we still have 450 houses that are not connected to the sewer system. And the only reason I bring that up, I know quite a few years ago, I supported down the east end of town to increase the sewer work down there, the pumping stations and so forth, because someday, you know, the homeowners or the city, there's going to be a problem with them when these septic systems don't work the way they did, you know, the first year they were in. So that being the case, I hope we do have a discussion tonight. So our aim of our committee is to come up with, to change the ordinance that will enable us, the section 510, to enable us to utilize the camera. Now, I happen to be familiar with the camera because sometimes as a curious city councilor, I will stop when the Department of Public Works is working on a street, and this camera can actually, I remember Hildreth Street in particular, this camera can go right down and see if there's blockage and so forth like that. And what they're saying now is they can see the stub, they can see where the pipe comes in from the house right into the sewer system, and that makes it a lot easier when the homeowner decides. And I hope you saw little points in there that homeowners have to convert to city sewerage when they're selling the house. So that's, sometimes people don't realize that, and I bring that up, that we could do. So, well, our aim tonight now is just, as I say, be a day that we update the section and then discuss it, see if that's what we want, then bring before the whole council and make it part of our city laws. Let's open up the discussion. Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman Landers. When I was reviewing President Ossing's letter, for me, it sounds like this is a great consideration for the residents. If you're in a position where you need to connect to sewer, you're probably either selling your home or your own septic system is no longer working. So it would eliminate an expense and also, as stated in the letter, some of the headaches. So for me, it's definitely something I would support.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Councilor Irish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm definitely in support of this. Over the years, I have heard residents, you know, with some questions on locating the stub and being educated as well on all that technology. So I have no issue supporting it. I guess I would like to know, I know it says, you know, tying in 425 parcels. I was curious to know how many homes that this would affect currently right now. Is there a number on file of some, like a plot plan? Is there a number on file that they do not know where the stub location is?
Well, that's why we have.
No,
that's
absolutely.
Why we have the experts.
So that was the question. But I'm in full support. I never realized, you know, all the work and technology that goes into, you know, finding the stub, and the whole idea about trying to be, you know, user friendly, friendly with the residents, trying to have that, you know, getting things completed on time. I think this would be a big hurdle going forward with that, especially for the homeowners having to tie in. Mm-hmm. And we have the technology, so yeah, I'll listen to the experts and everything, but you would have my support.
Well, I think I'm going to call on the experts right now. Commissioner, do you want to say a few words of, tell us how we did, or you can all come up if you'd like.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So while they're getting assembled, so just some context for the councilors. If you recall, the mayor's initiative, which was a good one, we actually had the ordinance on the book that said if we put sewer down your street, you're required with 180 days to hook up. We didn't do a very good job enforcing that. So this body, with the mayor's guidance, changed the ordinance to say, hey, when you sell your house, it's time to hook up to the sewer system, all right? So that way some of the costs could get settled in the closing costs of the transaction of the real estate, and the city meets its goal. We're spending all the money on the sewer, and now we're getting people to actually use the sewer. At the time of those meetings, the DPW informed us that there are around the order of 425 or so houses that could hook up to the sewer but weren't at this particular time. So you kind of knew about ballpark what the list was. And that continues to change as we continue to add more properties, add more sewers to the city. So what happened is about a couple months ago, we got a call from a resident that was concerned that the individual that they hired to connect their home to the sewer system, they didn't have a detailed drawing of the sewer stub. So that was going to require multiple excavations, what I would, in my terms, hunt and peck to try to find it, and all that costs the homeowner money. Now recognize at that time, you're trying to close on your house, you're looking to move things through. This shouldn't be hard. So I had conversations with the DPW, said, hey, we have the technology, you know, do we really have houses, do we not have the drawings? In some cases, that answer is yes. So the exact location, it's tough to go hand someone a drawing and say, dig here. So it was, well, how do we go about this? Does it have to be an ordinance change? I'll let the DPW address if that's something they're willing to do. My concern is I don't want to get in the case where if there is a big population of drawing or homeowners that don't have a drawing showing their sewer stub, I want to make sure that we're able to provide that service that says, hey, this is where you want to dig. Because remember, we're the ones that said you now have to hook up at time of, real estate transaction. And if we're going to now make that harder to say, I don't think any of our intent was you now got to go spend even more money to try to find a sewer stub that we put in. Well, I think most, Tom, you can correct me, maybe some developers put them in, but in most cases, we were supposed to have drawings and we don't. I think that's an unfair burden for the homeowner. So with that background, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
And I'm going to turn it back to the three experts sitting there. Sean, you're the boss there, but you can get help from all your supporting staff there.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, President Ossing. All good points that are raised. We thank you for having us here tonight. All sorts of thoughts we've had. We've talked about this internally, and fundamentally, what we have here is a conflict between the existing sewer ordinance and what this amendment tries to do. The existing sewer ordinance says the sewer service is owned by the property owner, not by the city. And so that's an operating principle we've worked with for years and years and years. And so now when talking about this, the discussion we've had, the concern we've had is, we're sympathetic to the cause. We know where folks are coming from here. But where does the city's responsibility start and end? Where does the homeowner's responsibility start and end? And then in terms of the actual construction of the connection, I think it's important that we talk about, what is a connection versus what is a stub. Because in our world, a connection is where, a service pipe would connect to the mainline sewer. A stub suggests, and is in our world, a piece of pipe that comes out of that connection to, in a case of building new sewers in a street, to the property line, to the edge of the right-of-way. And that's done for convenience for the homeowner, the property owner, to connect in the future, that it's there at the property line, they don't have to dig in the street. It's also beneficial to the city, where the city doesn't have to suffer from having the street dug up if it was recently paved after a sewer construction project. So, so those are sort of the conflicts that we're dealing with on our end, trying to sort this out. So that's sort of the summary. I've got Mr. DiPercio, Ms. Lafreniere here to answer some of the technical questions you may have.
Okay. I might have a few questions, but why don't we let Tom and Mr. Lafreniere give us.
So I guess one thing that's worth pointing out is there's sort of different categories of these situations where we may not have records. So as President Ossing mentioned, there were cases where developers put the sewers in. This has come up, this specific issue, what's spurring this discussion, has come up a couple of times in an area of the city where the developers of a subdivision put sewers in the 80s, so 50 years ago, close to 50 years ago, when there wasn't any sewer in that part of the city yet. So they put it in, probably at the request of the city, I'm sure, as just future, dry sewers for future use. The developer didn't keep good records of where those were left, and the city didn't apparently make sure that as-built plans were provided that showed where these sewer stubs were located. So that's one category, that there's some of those, and now since that time, since recently, we've now activated that part of the city for sewer, and that's why this has come up, as people have said, well, the developer put sewers in 50 years ago, where do I make the connection? And, we didn't have good records for that. In other cases, maybe the city put the sewer in the street many years ago, and the way I see it, the city had no real obligation to leave any stubs at the properties. It was done really to protect the city for future connections, not having to dig up the road and go all the way to the main, that's still an option in all these cases. It's not like a resident is required to dig up their whole property searching blindly for a stub. They can simply go to the main. Granted, that's more expensive to dig in the road, but I think that's an important thing for everyone to understand too. Yeah, I guess I was just addressing President Ossing's.
I just wanted to add one thing if possible. I just really want to highlight that it sounds like it's being implied because we have a camera that it's going to make finding these stubs a piece of cake, and that's just simply not the case. Sending our camera down the sewer main and identifying if there's a connection and where that connection is quite different than finding the end of a stub. Oftentimes, just by the way these things are constructed, it is not possible to get a camera down that stub to find out where it goes, how long it is, and often leads to excavations needing to take place. That's going to put the city in the position to be possibly dismantling stone walls, excavating out sidewalks to dig down and poke around and try to find where this thing is left, which can, just sort of spiral out of control. It'll lock up our dig crews for the city for an entire day plus going out trying to find this thing. And then also, what if we dig down and damage it? Are we now responsible for the damage that we did to the sewer line? If we do manage to get a camera up it, and these are tracked vehicles with cameras on it, and there is damage to the pipe, and we start exacerbating existing damage, well, did we touch it? Now we own it? So just a lot of questions come up as far as our liability, as far as touching what the city code deems as a private sewer service.
That's interesting, but, the way the president wrote his letter and the way I've been thinking and talking to a few people, I guess I would do almost anything to prevent digging up a street. The mess that some of our streets are in now, the result of the cable people and subcontractors coming in, that causes, Sean, the biggest problem with a lot of our streets. So if we're trying to get someone to convert from septic to city sewerage, or if we have a law that says they must do that when they sell their house, what you guys got to help us decide, is it advantageous for the city to participate in finding that pipe or that sub rather than digging up a street? I mean, if you're trying to get your streets improved, and all of a sudden, you get 3 houses in a row on XYZ Street that want to tie into the, one's selling the house and the other 2 says, hell, I might as well do it at the same time. I mean, do we want people to start digging up a street or a sidewalk to put in city sewage? So I thought it was kind of simple, Mr. Lafreniere, that I've only seen this camera work a couple of times, so I went over it lightly when I gave my presentation. But I thought basically that somehow you could go down with the camera, all right, down the sewer camera, and mark where this stub is, mark it with orange paint or red paint or whatever the heck you want to do, and that would be given to the contractor that's doing the work. It's not that simple. No?
That's correct. And oftentimes, just for an example, a lot of sewer networks, you have a main that runs down the roadway, and they have what are called chimneys, which is a vertical pipe on top of the sewer pipe that changes the elevation abruptly. There is no way to get a camera up and through that to figure out where it goes onto the parcel in question. So it, by default, just the way it was constructed, leads to having to excavate the road.
Okay, it's wide open for discussion here, guys and girls. Councilor Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the first thing, Tom, that we need to correct is that the 80s were 40 years ago, not 50. Some of us will take umbrage with that comment, specifically. No. Yes, it does. I appreciate the points that are being made. I think I very much appreciate the president's point here. Oftentimes we think we know what's under the road, and we would do so with the best of intentions. And that's why places like DigSafe exist. Although even when you mark things out with DigSafe and then you go in, you find things that aren't there. We had an issue a couple of weeks ago in a community where we were digging out to put a new valve in, and we discovered 2 giant duct banks that supplied electricity to a major transportation center in Metro Boston, and it was not on the plans. So I get that, we like to think that we know what's there. We did put a requirement on these homeowners, which I think is fair. Not only does the city not want to dig up roadways, when we want homeowners to connect, we want ratepayers for the sewer system that we've already invested the money in. I think making it a little bit easier for them at a time where they're trying to figure out a major financial decision in their life is worth it. With respect to the fact, Mr. LaFreniere, that it's not that easy, I certainly appreciate that. If there is any sort of narrowing down or advancing that camera work can do to help, I think it's on the city's responsibility to do so. If we didn't get as-built in the 80s, obviously it's no one's here's fault, even though it was only 40 years ago. If those weren't done, that's on the city's onus, in my opinion. If we didn't follow up and get them, or all we have is design drawings on hand, and we can't be sure. I don't think it's our responsibility, or excuse me, I don't think it's the homeowner's responsibility when we're already putting additional requirements on them. So I would be supportive of this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Orr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question, okay, we mentioned that there's an order of about 425 parcels that need to connect. Of those parcels, how many of them do have good plans for the sewer line to show where the stubs are?
So we tried to get a handle on that in my office, and some of it is, it may look like a good plan and not be accurate at the end of the day, but it seems like there's maybe on the order of 30 maybe of that list that we don't seem to have records on the stub location.
So about 30 parcels are what we're looking at. And of those 30 parcels, I presume they're not the new sewer work that was just completed. I'm hoping that we got appropriate plans for where the stubs are. So when we're looking at Sudbury Road, Concord Road, and the neighborhoods in that area, we do have accurate plans. Is it more like up Gooddale, those that old subdivision, not old, but the 40-plus-year-old subdivisions up there?
Yeah, so the ones I was talking about was part of the first phase of Carisbrook.
Yep. Okay. Well, really, even that subdivision, wow.
Yes.
So.
And again, those were put in as dry sewer. It was like, who knows if there's ever going to be sewer down here, but the developer was required to put those in.
Yeah. No, and that's good faith effort, but unfortunately, and I agree with Councilor Navin, if we didn't ask for properly designed as-built of where the stubs were, I think maybe, even if it's a matter of a capital improvement, that we look at those 30, give or take, plus parcels and try to do our best to at least find where, unless there's chimneys or bad angles, to try to find out where that stub may have been left so we can have better accurate plans for the people that may be selling, such as at Carisbrook. Maybe make it a project so that we can complete. It's not bad. If you only have 30 out of 425 parcels, that's not a bad percentage.
I just want to add, I think it's important, out of those 400, the majority, I would say, we certainly have good records. But even if you have meticulous records, the problem is over decades, The records a lot of times use measurements from fixed points in the road or buildings. Things change, utility poles move, hydrants move, so we get a lot of these hookup requests over the years, and even if you have great records, there's often a degree of exploration that needs to take place. So even if the city had all their ducks in a row, got all the records, that doesn't mean that the contractor is just going to be able to walk with those plans and find that stuff. And there's often excavation and exploration that's needed.
And I don't disagree with you on that, and it's a project. That's why I said the word project. It's not an easy project, that's for sure. But at the same time, as Councilor Navin noted, I think we're responsible up to the edge of the pavement. And if we don't have the accurate records, it's no fault on your behalf. All three of you, just fairly new here. It's basically a fault of the previous people who worked at your department who didn't require accurate as-built. And indeed, if there was an as-built that depended on a telephone pole that was moved, it will be easier, at least if we don't have the point where you're going to go from, but at least to see what the as-built showed, because if we don't do it now, I feel bad. I worked in the Title V area for 40 years. There's a 40 years for you. And, you know, panic starts when you go to sell your house and you don't have a way to get connected per the ordinance. Panic starts if they're doing a septic inspection in a city or town that allows for them to keep that system if no sewer is available. But the panic is, if it fails, now they can't sell the house without conditions. So I understand the homeowner's side as well. It's a very difficult time for them. They're trying to move on. And at the same time, and I'm going to go back to now the city of Marlborough, they can't connect until they start tearing up the yard, or at least up to the, I don't have a problem with their side of the property. I have a problem with our side of the property if we don't have accurate records. So I don't see an issue with the city starting the process, and the commissioner, if he needs additional funding for this, so be it. We're going to need accurate records, but it's not fair to our homeowners. And again, they're at a critical time in their lifetime. They're selling their greatest asset, their house. And they may want to go on to other areas of their life and not have to worry about that. So indeed, they will have to pay for some of the money, some of the work through up to the property of the city, in my view. But I think we need to do our part. And I say we as a whole. I'm not looking at you guys blaming you by any means. You have the evidence, you have the knowledge, and you know it's not going to be easy. But if it's not going to be, I suggest put your facts together and let us know the cost. If it's 35, I hope it's not a tremendous cost, but if we could get accurate points of stubs to the end of the city property line, I think that would be appropriate, especially starting it now and not later when the panic becomes an issue with the person trying to sell their home. So that's my opinion. That's why I would support this. And again, I understand the difficulties mentioned, and we have to work as a team on this because it's critical that we offer the appropriate opportunity for someone to sell their home if they have to tie in a sewer. Now, with that said, I do want to just ask one question of the ordinance, if I may, and Mr. President, you may have the eye. It says here with city drawings. Should that just say city drawings or developer drawings, where in the ordinance it says where city drawings do not exist? Should that say city or other drawings do not exist, such as, because it may not be a city drawing, it could be a developer's drawing.
Just say what drawings don't exist.
I was wondering, just scratch out city and say drawings at the DPW do not exist. You know, I just think that might be easier, because if it's a city drawing, that's one thing, but if it's a developer drawing, it doesn't address it. And the other one is the word timely fashion. The word timely can, what does it mean? And again, I truly can feel that timely to me, if they can't find the stub, might be different than timely to the person trying to sell their home. So it's general, you know, and hopefully we can wrap that up a little bit where most people want to get out of their home within 90 days if they have a sale. You remember 2 years ago, my Lord, it was crazy. Everyone was selling left and right, and obviously the market was crazy. But I would say maybe tighten it up a little bit within 3 months or something like that versus the word timely. But I want to hear from you. You're the experts. Is that reasonable to go look for a stub up to the city property in 3 months if a house is for sale and they can't tie in because they don't know where the stub is? On city property. Again, I'm emphasizing city property. Their responsibility is their property onward. So.
Okay, I just want to back up to my point about the 30 or so
Yes.
situations that we're talking about, because I think the scope of the city's responsibility here is going to be much bigger than that, because I can envision a lot of cases where we do have what we feel like is a good record, but even if you have perfect ties to a location, there's going to be a fair amount of digging by a contractor to find it when you start digging an excavation. So at what point is that excavation contractor going to throw up his hands and say, well, the city's required to find this? Get your camera out here and find it for us. Even though we've got good ties, it's going to be easy for them to say, well, something's wrong here, after a half hour of digging. So I can really see the scope of this being much bigger than just the 30 that maybe now our records show that appeared to be missing.
Tom, if I may, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
to Tom.
Finish,
Tom,
and then I got a couple questions.
how many connections do we have in the newer sewers in Marlborough, say the past, that have accurate records, say the past 15, 20 years?
I don't follow you.
Well, we just did the Concord Road, Sudbury Road area. How many homes have connections to that system? That was just put in, even when I first started, we approved that with Councilor Delano, requesting those be put in. And
Sudbury area project?
thank you. I knew it had a name. I couldn't remember it. Thank you.
Not a lot, a dozen or so, I think.
That's all we had on that sewer line, is just a dozen. So these are really, the 425 are not just that, there's quite a few outside of that.
No, the bulk of the 425 is that area.
Oh, it is the Sudbury project?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm back to what I was thinking. It shouldn't be a tremendous amount of work if we're down into what would be an accurate number that we're not for sure of on these tie-ins?
Well, my point was, even on, say, that project.
Yes.
We've got great records and ties. A contractor may start digging, and like I said, it's normal that there's going to be a little bit of searching, even if you know where it should be.
Did the stub go to the end of the city line?
Yes.
Then let them dig on their own property. I don't think that's our responsibility. I hope I made myself clear. Well, in my view, then, if it doesn't make it clear, I would ask that we consider up to the city property line, as long as that's where we ended. On those stubs, were they ending at the city property line?
Yes.
Okay, so it makes sense then that once it's past the city property line, that's their responsibility.
But Councilor, I'm saying,
yeah, but it's not here.
It still takes a little bit of searching with a machine.
Yeah.
And I can see contractors trying to limit the amount of work that they have to do and just say, the city needs to come out here and camera this line.
But let me know if I'm wrong, but couldn't you say to them, listen, your responsibility is up to the city property line? Am I wrong in saying that?
Yeah, I don't think you really...
You can't say that to them?
Well, I think your point is that
what the point
yeah,
of
I think
saying
I think their point is that how thorough is the developer or the contractor that's doing the job? Because if he just waves his hand out for half an hour, we know where it is. If he doesn't do it, and I actually had a friend who had the same issue, but it was his water pipe, and the city and them were going back and forth. The developer or the contractor says the city said it was the contractor, and it was back and forth. And I think that's where you're getting in. To your point is, we may know where it is, but if you don't have a thorough digger or contractor,
or even knowing where it is, there's still room for error there.
Right. And if the contractor doesn't want to do the work because he's running behind or this, he's like, no, it's the city's job, and may pass the buck.
I can see that up to the city property line, that it's our responsibility. Past that, if they have to dig more, and they don't have an engineer, Tom, you're an engineer, get an engineer. I worked with contractors that don't
want... None of the stubs really go beyond the city property.
What's that again?
None of the stubs go beyond the city property.
There we go. So if it's on city property, and it ends at city property, I don't see an issue. They have to get connected on their property to that stub. But again, I might be wrong, but I don't see an issue with that. We take care of our end, they take care of their end, unless you feel this ordinance doesn't say it that way. I mean, we could have legal look at that, but Mr. Chair, I've spoken enough. I'll
We can
yield.
have another round in a minute. Councilman Navin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a real quick clarification on this. Fair point about the fact that, again, you know, you may think it's here, maybe 5 feet this way, but according to this ordinance change, you know, just because the contractor takes a little while to find it at, you know, to be fair, at the expense of the homeowner and the time of the contractor, they couldn't go to us based on this ordinance and say, we can't find it, you gotta tell us where it is, if the city in fact has as-bills that they can provide. So that wouldn't be, right, that wouldn't leave us open to that point, my understanding of reading the ordinance change.
I think their assertion would be, well, your as-built aren't accurate, and the intent was for us to be able to locate this thing, so get in here and locate it.
I understand that, and that would then be a dialogue, as I'm sure the city often has with homeowners that say, we are the aggrieved party, you need to help us out, or we want money back because of such and such. You know, if there's a damage claim or something else, and that could be a conversation. My point is that based on the ordinance change, the city would not be required to then go and find it if the city can produce the drawings.
That would be my guess, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, sure.
So again, what's the objective here? The objective is, it started with a homeowner and a contractor that couldn't find the connection point, all right? City line, so I'm gonna turn the question to you. What would you put in an ordinance change to make the DPW work collaboratively with a contractor that can't find something that we are supposed to have as a city? All right, I mean, put yourself in the homeowner's spot. It's your house and you gotta hook up to the city because the city said you shall hook up before you sell your house. And no one can produce drawings. All right, so how do I look at that homeowner and say, well, tough luck for you. I mean, that's really too bad. What would you change, or how would you want the ordinance to read? I'm open to any. This was just our first attempt by Council Wagner and I. I'll take any suggestions that you think are reasonable, but I don't think we're gonna leave here saying, well, good luck contractor, good luck homeowner, with drawings that we as a city are supposed to have and don't.
So my response to that would be, you know, picture a homeowner's lot, say they have, we'll just pick a number, 300 feet of frontage. They know there's a sewer line that runs along that frontage. They want to know where that stub is to connect. So the technology that we have right now, we could drop our camera into the mainline sewer. We can run the camera up the main sewer line. We can find where there's potentially a point of connection. That we can find, that we can, with some degree of certainty, you know, spray paint on the asphalt, here's where we think the point of connection is. The stub itself is something different. We don't have the technology that we can launch a side camera off to go up the stub to see where that stub may go. There are cameras that do that. They were very, very expensive. There's only a few contractors that I know of in the Commonwealth that do that. So it's sort of like saying that the mainline sewer is a highway and an on-ramp is the point of connection. But where that on-ramp goes, we don't know, and we don't have the technology to get there. So you know, the lowest hanging fruit is to say, okay, we can identify potential point of connection. Beyond there, we don't know. We don't know where that pipe.
Well, I was thinking that's what we were striving for the point of connection, and then how far would the stub go in anyways? 4 to 6 feet? And why is that necessary to have that? If we could notice where the stub meets the main line going up and spray painted, I mean, we're giving the contractor pretty good information that we can't give them on drawings. But the stub, how far does that go in, Sean?
Well, it depends where the source.
Why do you have to go in there?
So what we're talking about, the stub is between the point of connection and ideally the property line, the right-of-way line.
Okay.
But that's the pipe, that's what I'm talking about, is we may not necessarily know where that goes, and we don't have the technology to tell us where it goes.
There's probably 25 feet or
Right.
so.
What's that, Tom?
25 feet or so from the main to the property line, usually.
Oh, can it be that much? Okay.
So again, I get back to Mr. Chair, what would you offer? Help us. I mean, we're trying to help a homeowner. I don't want to make it simple for the contractor, but I don't want them making Swiss cheese out of the homeowner's property line, right? I mean, if we have the capability to say where the point of connection is, I'm good with that. That's great. Contractor, it hooks here. Now contractor, you go find it. That's your part. But if I can't tell them where here is, to me, I got an issue with that, all right? So, I mean, tell me what the right words are. I'll put the right words however you think it should be, but I want to be helpful to the homeowner and say, okay, I'm going to at least give you a direct, I can't say, unless do they just bore into the sewer line, pick any point, and just make their own connection at that point? I mean, if that's what the rule is,
Right.
tell them that's what the rule is. There is no connection point, and go hook up to the sewer and dig up our streets because we're, not in my terms, we don't have the drawings that show where a point of connection should be. I think if there is supposed to be a point of connection, we should at least make an attempt to show where that is and start there. And if they're wrong, just keep tunneling and you're gonna eat up that expense and go to the sewer line and hook up.
And I don't necessarily disagree. You know, absent some extraordinary circumstance, I think we can put our camera down there, run the camera up the main line to see where a potential point of connection is.
Because I'm not looking for you to drive 25 feet left up to the city property line. I just, find me where the connection point is, and then the contractors, they've done it enough times, they know how to find it, they're pretty savvy, I'll just leave it at that, and they can figure that out. But if I can't at least tell them where that point of connection is, I think we're doing the homeowner a disservice. That we should at least be able, if, you know, our technology can get there. I acknowledge if the pipe drops and I can't get my equipment down there, yep, no, I can't help you there then. I mean, that's just part of how the design is, I guess. I mean, I don't know if you get down from the other end or there may not be a connection from the other end. But I'm looking for, how do I at least help the homeowner so that they can at least give them some credible information to say, head in this direction. And to me, I don't think it should be the contract, because I assume that as the process works, the contractor comes to you and says, I'm now gonna hook up house X to the sewer system, show me what drawings you have, all right? And then you guys say, here they are, or, geez, these ones aren't the best, you know. I don't wanna say, well, good luck and go forward, right? That's the question or the answer I don't wanna have. I wanna have, how do I help them be successful? Because remember, we're putting the homeowner under a burden. As Councilor Oram stated, it's a stressful time in their life. They're not exactly excited about the city because we're telling them they have to hook up. And now when they find out homeowner X has drawings and homeowner Y doesn't, and homeowner Y's fending for themselves, it just doesn't, as a counselor, it doesn't sit well with me.
So identifying the point of connection, as I said, we can drop our camera into the mainline sewer. Pretty sure, you know, absent some extraordinary circumstance, I think we can find that. And so if we make that commitment to do that, I'm not necessarily sure that we need an ordinance that describes that. Because we don't want to be in conflict with the ordinance as it is right now, which says the service is owned by the property owner all the way to the main line. We make the argument, the city owns the main line, obviously. We'll show that point of connection. We'll help a property owner out with that. Then, in my opinion, we don't need the ordinance. That's a policy decision we can make. That's the part that's where the city comes in to be the helping hand, and we can identify that point. Then we don't have to do anything with the ordinance.
I'm good if you want to have that policy written down for us to show, so that we all walk out of here and nod our heads saying, hey, this is the policy we're going to have going forward. Personally, Mr. Chair, I'm good with that. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but...
I would be somewhat comfortable with that, Chuck.
But again, the measurement's gonna come when the phone calls start coming that says it's not working. But, I mean, as I stated initially when I put this together, I feel not really great having to put this kind of detail in an ordinance. I mean, to me, if it's something we don't have, we should be helping the contractor and the homeowner find that particular point of connection. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Orm.
Just a quick question here, and we'll have further dialogue, I'm sure. Do you have, once you find that, you send the camera down, you find the passageway for the stub, do you or do the contractors have any of those type snakes that have an ending to it that they can either detect by radar or x-rays or whatever, or even a rattle? Back in the day, in the 80s, I remember them rattling pipes for septic systems, and you could stand on the ground, you could feel the rattle underneath you. But I don't know, is that technology available to you or to the contractors?
It is available. We do have it, but like I said, it's not very reliable. There are circumstances where it's easy to get that accessory to our camera down that line, but more often than not, there's a chimney, there's a acute angle that can't be made with that piece of equipment, and we just don't feel comfortable making that attempt. Or we run the risk of getting it stuck and having to excavate to remove the equipment.
It almost sounds like you're medical professionals here doing a catheterization here. But on that note, so if you can't find that, does that mean the contractor has to dig up our road?
Yeah, so what we usually do is, in the past, historically, our policy is this is on the property owner or contractor to find. They would hire a camera company to go in our main line with our assistance. We would open it up for them. They'd take some elevation shots to figure out how deep this thing is. They would send their camera down, and if they can't make that turn into the lateral, they'll assume at this end depth and at this connection point that it runs perpendicular to the main and it ends at the property line, and that's where their point of initial excavation will be. But more often than not, it's a series of test pitting that goes on to actually find out where it was laid, because it's not always perpendicular. It comes in at an angle. And that also, I just want to let everybody know that these stubs were put in before these parcels were developed, and these stubs were put in locations on the main line that might not work well for some of these homeowners that need to make a connection. It could be 100 feet away from where the house was actually built. So I just also don't want the city to be in a position where they're saying, well, that stub was left at an improper elevation, that stub was left at an improper location, put it where it needs to be to make my property be able to hook in. I don't think the city should have that responsibility.
They should be responsible for possibly an environmental pump, correct?
True,
Pump?
yes.
Okay. But I'm learning more, because I thought we were responsible up to the end of the city road. I didn't realize we're only responsible for the main. I thought we were responsible to the stub at the property line, so.
Right, for both the water and the sewer. And we push back pretty hard at DPW on taking that burden for our staff and for our operating budget to take care of issues that technically by the general code are the responsibility of the property owner, repairs on services, for instance, that fall in the city right away.
And I do like the cooperative approach, though, too. I'm sure you just don't shut the door on them and say, go figure it out yourself, because you said you have to open up the sewer line for them and let them in and all that, so.
Yep, and we're working side by side with the contractors that are trying to find these things and opening things up for them and giving them our best records and our best guess and using our experience to try to help them.
Well, and I go back to where I started with, I think we should key in on the ones we don't know and try to see if we can get some advance information before it comes to the end point where they sold their house, so. But thank you, I learned a lot from all of you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Naaman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate those points. And I don't want to seem like I'm trying to advocate that the city should be taking on a whole bunch of liability that, you know, we don't need and is quite frankly not our responsibility, because I'm certainly not. You know, but I do think that making a small change here, I think, is helpful, and I don't think that it would open us up to Mr. LaFrenne, the point that you just made of saying, you know, this is an old stub that is, you know, say it's over in Carisbrook and the house wasn't built yet, and all of a sudden they go out there and it's not at the elevation. I don't think this would require or open the city up to any sort of issues with risk management or, you know, to where we would be liable or where there would be a claim against us. you know, and not to repeat the same points, I do think it is helpful to have this. If there, and I appreciate a policy change, which would be great, as long as the people that are sitting in this room, and as long as the administration that is on the fourth floor is on the fourth floor, but we don't know in the future. So, you know, I do think having a change, if the verbiage that you think needs to change because of the difference between a stub and a connection, and you want to just make it a little bit lighter and say something along the lines of, you know, will help the city, you know, find the general direction of a connection, you know, help the contractor, something along those lines, I think that's good. I think it's helpful to have something changed. I agree, we don't need to, you know, have an ordinance change every time there's something small, but this does seem like we don't want to have the liability. The other question I wanted to ask is, Commissioner, you mentioned that we don't have the camera, we don't have the technology, but there are contractors that do. Obviously, we don't have it because it would be a very limited use and a very expensive piece of technology. What would something like that cost if we were to try and find a contractor to find the 30 to use that kind of technology for the 30 connections? And I know that's putting you on the spot, so I know it's a rough and tough number. So, but you know, do you know what I mean, right? Is there a project? And I'm not saying that this is the best use of money, but at the same time, we also don't want to go and punch holes in our road, and we don't want to have ownership of damage to property and whatnot. So I'm just kind of curious: is there a way around this where we could try and track down the information for our own benefit as well? Because the next people who'll be sitting in any of our chairs may have that same issue with, you know, the lack of as-built.
So I'm not certain what the cost would be, but I'm fairly certain that if we were to hire a contractor with this technology to do this work, we probably end up paying a day rate. So we'd pay the contractor for the day, and whatever that contractor got done in the day is great, but we'd pay him for the day. So then the question is, how many days would we need the contractor out there? And you know, you throw a number out, say it's, you know, $2,000 a day. That's probably a reasonable number. Could be more. Then the question is, how many days, how many obstructions do they run into? You know, what sort of things pop up? So there's certainly a cost there too. But then the question is, you know, if they do this lateral launch and go up the pipe, then it raises the question of, you know, what, now they found something. So now what's the city's obligation? The sewer stub, remember, was put in as a convenience to the property owner and a convenience to the city. So if this launch discovers that the stub is crushed or is leaking or something of that nature, then, you know, then what do we do?
Right.
So that raises that question. I don't have the answer for that right now.
Well, if the homeowner found that their stub, you know, or their connection to the pipe that goes to their house that is clearly on their property today was crushed, had a root, what have you, whose responsibility would it be?
If it's on
their property.
The homeowner.
It would be the homeowner's.
So
Even if it's on the city side, it would also be the homeowner's responsibility.
So how does finding it change whose responsibility it is?
I guess, let me ask a little more simple. Why are we even looking for them? Why don't we just tell the contractor, just go bore into the main sewer line then? What am I missing?
That's an alternative. That's a viable alternative that happens. So when cases like this pop up, where the point of connection is not known, a stub is not known, the quality of the stub is not known, often a contractor will say, well, it's easier and it's less expensive for me when I charge the homeowner to just make a new connection at a point that's preferable to where the house is now built, and maybe there's retaining walls of mature trees and things in driveways and things of that nature.
Mr. Chair, if I could, so then the downside is, if there's that the stub connection on the property line, I'm not messing around in the street. If I sit there and say, so now my $8,000 job to connect to the city sewer, and now that's if I find the stub connection. If I don't find the stub connection, I have to go into the street. I'm now tearing up asphalt. Then I got to follow the city guidelines for compacting, repaving, resurfacing, sidewalks, streets, and all that as well. So now my $8,000 job becomes a lot more expensive. Is that a right way of looking at it?
Now, when you hire a contractor to do this, the homeowner now, does that contractor tell them that this is how we're gonna do it, but if it doesn't work, it's gonna have to be, you know, more involved?
No, I think the contractor would advise the city on what was found, and then we'd make a determination from there on what should be done.
By the contractor?
Yeah, by the contractor the city hires to do this investigation work.
I mean, you know, my philosophy still is to do as much work on the property owner's side and dig up as little as possible in the city side or the street. And that's why I thought the camera was solving my dilemma of which way I like, and that you would use the camera, mark it, all right, and then give it marking to the contractor, and then he starts in, and, you know, he talks to his homeowner, and if it goes smoothly, it's gonna be 8,000 to 10,000. If it doesn't go smoothly, or if they have to go back out to the street, to the main line, it could double. But I agree with, you know, the president here that we gotta do something. Not maybe what we originally proposed, but something to, I'd like to get these moving. I'd like to see as many people as possible. Homeowners that are selling have to install on the city side, the city water, city sewage, and it might encourage some of the others also. Okay, Councilor Brown, are we all set? You got a few things? Yeah. Oh,
Thank you, Chair Landers. I was just going to say, after listening to everybody, I do feel like for the residents, we need to provide something. I think it would be really awful to represent the people of Marlborough and then just say, you know, we don't have the drawings, but this is all your problem now. So I agree that maybe not this specific wording, but there should be something provided to the residents that, especially if we have the technology and the camera, if we're not able to find the stub, I feel like it's at least a nice gesture and attempt to try to narrow it down as close as we could. So, you know, I still support making a change. It doesn't have to be this exact wording, but something that would benefit the residents and not just make all of the onus on them. Thank you.
Okay, any other councilors? Yeah, Councilor.
Thanks, Chair. I totally agree. I mean, that was the whole idea of meeting this evening, was to try to get something for the residents, compromise or to work with the residents. Maybe, like you said, Commissioner Duvall, maybe not an ordinance, but like Councilor Ossing said, some kind of language that you can use as a tool to be able to work with the resident to tie in. And thank you, Chris Lafreniere. I didn't realize, I assumed that if you had the sewer stub plans on file, that would be immediately 100% accurate. I didn't know that, so thank you for the education. So that's where I'm a little concerned with this, how much responsibility now is going to be on the city. But I do want to work with the residents and make it as easy as possible. Like President Austin said, this is an ordinance that we have, that we want people to tie into the sewer system. And I'd like to see some kind of a language that we can work with to be able to pass that on to our residents and make it easier for you. And obviously you are working currently with the residents and the contractors when they come into you looking for where the plans are. So that's what I'm looking for, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Someone else?
Yeah, no, you're all set.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm good with leaving this in committee and asking the DPW to develop a policy and get back to us, and I'll let the DPW pick whatever time frame to develop that policy is, and we can look at it. If it looks like it satisfies the intent what we're looking for, then that should be sufficient, and we can let this go away. If it doesn't, I think it would be beneficial to let the DPW draft a policy or guidelines in, so that everybody has the same message when the contractor and homeowner walk into the DPW office, how are we going to handle these particular cases? And I'll let you guys draft what you think is appropriate at a timeline that's reasonable to get back to the council. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. I'll take Thursday.
And Thursday's fine, before the weekend. No, I'd concur
No, I
with
mean,
that.
a month, 2 months, but I just, pick up something, Chris, whatever you think is the right way to address it, I'm okay. I prefer not an ordinance change, so if there's some policy that the DPW is willing to craft so that we all have the same understanding, when that phone call rings, it says the homeowner's losing their mind because the contractor's charging them an exorbitant amount of money digging for holes. I'd like to be able to nip it quick and say, hey, this is the guidelines, this is what should be happening, and if it's not, we all are on the same page to say this is how we should be going forward.
Mr. Chair, if I can
Yes.
just add one more
Councilor Orr.
request to the, I agree with the process to come back to us. I'd like to know how many of these troublesome type connections you see a year in maybe the past 5 years, and also what the cost may be. If you can, I know you gave us an estimate, Mr. Commissioner, of I think 2,000 per day, but how many we have a year that we've seen over the maybe past 5 years or 10 years, whatever you can gather, for the troublesome ones out of the total, so we'll know the percentage. And if you can do some more cost analysis, don't mean to put you on the spot right here, but so we can see that with your proposal, I'll say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. Any other councilors? Do you guys have a parting shot? Sean, you have any more comments?
Oh, I think we're all set. We've got some
Okay, I
good
concur
direction
with
tonight.
the president here, chair here, but I think put it back in your lap in a sense, that see what type of policy you guys want to work out, and we'll leave the committee open. We'll bring it back to committee. You can present your policy, and we'd probably have a much different discussion.
Excellent. Happy to do it.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, can I have a motion to,
Do you want to postpone, Mr. President, or is it table?
what do you want?
Postpone?
Do whatever you want. I mean,
Karen, we want to postpone it then. Okay, make a motion to postpone?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Motion to postpone order number 23-100-8860.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor? Okay, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.